Carl Froch has been nice enough to remind us that he would have been too big and too strong for Triple G Gennady Golovkin. Carl Froch's last fight was, of course, his rematch against George Groves in front of 80,000 people. He won by a spectacular one-punch knockout, and then there was this lingering period in his career before it officially ended. He hadn't fought in Vegas yet, and that was a box he wanted to tick, as of course most fighters would want to tick given the opportunity. He was thinking about fighting Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in Vegas for his official last fight. A fight that he would have been pretty heavily favoured to win, but the styles, the fact Chavez Jr. is tough, it probably still would have been a decent fight for a fight to say adios to. Well, what happened, of course, was he retired eventually after beating Groves, after deciding, and gave us that obnoxious tweet on Twitter where when people were calling for the prospect of Triple G and Froch, he just simply said, too big, too strong, and gave us that nice picture on Twitter. What would have actually happened had they fought? Now, Froch said recently the dispute was between £2. Golovkin and his team wanted it at 166, £2 below the super middleweight limit. Froch said he just simply couldn't give up any more weight than 168 pounds, that he rigorously trained himself down to that weight with his diary, taking his notes all the time if he's hitting his targets. And had he tried to reduce more, or given into the supposed stipulation, he would have been a weakened fighter and put himself at a disadvantage. Whether that's true, I don't know. Too much time's passed. It's Twitter wars, isn't it now? Whatever carries on between that saga that never was. But had it have happened, what would have happened? He did ask the public on Facebook, who do you want to see me fight next? When he hadn't decided yet that he was going to retire. He gave us a choice. James DeGale, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. or Gennady Golovkin. Golovkin won by a pretty good margin. But what would have happened? Now, in terms of what Golovkin's facing, Carl Froch, on the understanding that he would have been near his best, he brings height at about 6'1", he brings length, and he brings that steam training style, as he likes to say. Well, I think he presents a style and a danger where he could probably be the biggest puncher Golovkin had fought. I don't want to get into the sticky argument of in terms of who's the biggest one-punch guy, but I'm just talking about if you're in the ring with Froch, or if Golovkin is, who's a bit hittable, has to be said, one of his slight flaws, over 36 minutes, Carl Froch could do a lot of damage. He could mark him up worse than Canelo did in that second fight, definitely. As I say, Froch wasn't a great boxer, but he did know how to use his length at times, moved around in that awkward way. And he could just get stuck in that would really test the engine and the chin of Golovkin. Now, Golovkin's chin, I think, is absolutely fantastic. I don't necessarily see Froch taking him out with a shot here and there, but he could mark him up bad and make him feel sorry for himself. If it just gets down to just slugging, I really don't know who's necessarily going to win, because Froch was super tough and pretty powerful with his heavy hands. The argument that says Golovkin wins, I don't think it's just necessarily how Golovkin was perceived back in about 2015, when we were probably getting a bit over the top. People were talking about comparisons with Hagler, with Monzon, and I was like, hang on a minute, this guy needs to prove himself a bit more. But he was very destructive. But no, that wasn't the point. I don't necessarily think people favoured Golovkin over Froch. It's because of how hittable Froch is. Hands down, chin often in the air, squares up, and tries to punch back sometimes when a bit hurt and not in position at all. Those are bad habits that could bury you against somebody like Golovkin, who not only could punch hard with both hands, but he picked his punch as well. He didn't just wing away like a moron. He thought about what he was doing. If there's one of the biggest takeaways from those Canelo fights, if you're watching back, forget the decisions and the outcomes, it's some of the clever shots Golovkin picks against Canelo, who is defensively astute. Golovkin would throw in clever uppercuts, fake the jab, come in with the hook. He's never been the fastest, but he is clever when it comes to shot selection. And with Froch coming in, trying to steam train you, Golovkin's got a lot of tools at his disposal to crack that chin. All in all, I think the styles would have gelled real nice. It would have been brutal. And that's why people wanted it so much. As big of an event as Groves 2 was, and it was great for British boxing and still is, the effects of it, it wasn't a great fight. They were a bit tentative on the big stage, and so people just wanted to see an absolute tear-up between the Kazakh monster and the Sheriff of Nottingham, but we didn't get it. Froch, of course, is always just going to say he was big too strong, and I'm sure Golovkin will say that had he played ball, I would have taken him out. But what do you think? Had the fight happened in 2015, on the understanding that Carl Froch would have been near his best, those guys slugging it out in the centre of the ring, who comes out on top?